台发现有6瓶目标。
看点杀！
The dispute in the South China Sea is like so many potentially dangerous international conflicts over territory, and multiple countries claiming the same territory. In this case, no fewer than 6 countries: China, the Philippines, Vietnam, Taiwan, Brunei, and Malaysia. But this one adds a unique question as to whether some of this territory exists at all, because China, over the last several years, has added some 3,000 acres, in effect manufacturing land where there used to just be reefs that barely poked above the surface. China today says that this is Chinese land. The U.S. says it is still international waters, international airspace. China, in addition to building those islands, is now militarizing them, basing military aircraft, military warships, and missile systems on those manufactured reefs. The U.S. responding by sailing its warplanes and warships through those waters to demonstrate its point that they remain international. For now, that dispute has played out purely with words. The danger is, though, that there could be a miscalculation or an escalation that leads to something worse and much more dangerous.
China is refusing to recognise The Hague's historic court ruling yesterday over territory in the South China Sea in favour of the Philippines. Beijing says it might now then boost its military presence in the region. Emily Susie to tell us more about this. This ruling yesterday was expected, and so was China's reaction to it. It said it wasn't going to listen to what The Hague had to say, and sure enough, that was followed through, wasn't it?
Well, yes, absolutely, Kevin. Let me take you back to the beginning. From the very beginning, when the case was first submitted to the Permanent Arbitration Court at The Hague over 3 years ago, China already dismissed it as a political farce, saying they won't recognize it, they won't accept it, and they won't enforce it. After the ruling was handed down yesterday, well, China reiterated that, but stressed that they're willing to resume dialogue with the Philippines in order to resolve this conflict. But speaking at a press conference yesterday, actually today, the Vice Foreign Minister, his tone wasn't so diplomatic. Let's take a listen.
None of the 5 members from the arbitration panel comes from Asia. Do they understand Asia? About the issue of the South China Sea? The 5 judges are paid. The Philippines paid them. Maybe some other countries also paid them. We don't know. They work for profit.
The Vice Foreign Minister, he didn't name any names, but the fact that the U.S. and the Philippines, they are treaty allies, and that the U.S. has several military bases in the Philippines, well, many analysts are suspecting that this case really is orchestrated by the U.S. in the name of their so-called diplomatic and military pivot or rebalance towards Asia. Here's how the Chinese Foreign Ministry had put it.
Before the United States adopted the rebalancing strategy, there had been some disputes in the region and some contradictions between the related countries. But on the whole, the countries in the region had been able to maintain the overall peace, stability and security. The situation began to change only after the United States adopted the rebalancing strategy in the Asia-Pacific region.
Well, this view that the U.S. is meddling with the case is supported by many on Chinese social media. Here are some of the comments I've come across.
It's the US stirring up shit again, or else how could the Philippines do this on its own?
How's this any of US business? It's like they got nothing else better to do.
The Philippines and the US are disgusting.
If there was no backing from the US and Japan, would the Philippines dare to fight against China over territory that is China's to begin with?
Yeah, I mean, even from that small selection of clips, the US keeps coming up. What has been the official reaction from the US to this ruling yesterday?
Well, Kevin, the U.S. has denied the accusation that they have any involvement in this case. And here's the State Department's take on the ruling.
This isn't about the United States projecting moral authority. This is an international tribunal which came up with a legally binding decision that the United States didn't influence. We said before that they reached it, that it would be legally binding. So did the world. Now they've reached it. It's still legally binding.
So the US is happy with this result. The Philippines obviously happy with this result. China's going, hey, what result? Where's it going to go now?
Well, many are expecting both sides to step up their military game in the region, but nothing substantial has happened just yet. So far, it's only talk and flexing military muscles, if you will. But today, China reiterated that it has the right to set up an air defense zone above the South China Sea if it thinks is necessary. But they didn't go as far as saying that they will for sure. It would depend on the level of threat they face. Now, it's for the viewers to judge whether or not that's an overreaction. But one thing I do want to point out is that all the countries with claims in the South China Sea, they either already have or are developing military ties with the U.S. And let's not forget, Japan and South Korea are also U.S. allies. And recently, there have been numerous mass protests because people there are not happy with U.S. military deployments in those two countries. So if we take a step back and looking at the overall picture, with China effectively surrounded by pro-U.S. forces, well, the question that begs to be asked is, who really is the real threat here?
Yeah, the whole story about that question of the 9-dash line there and who owns what and who's got stake in it's going to be a real hot spot to watch, isn't it? Emily, Sue, thank you for now. We spoke earlier to Victor Gao. He's director of the China National Association of International Studies. He said, as we've been hearing there, that China's open to dialogue with its neighbour in order to try to resolve the dispute here, but doesn't want any external interference.
It is very obvious from the very beginning that the United States was very much involved in this arbitration case brought by the Philippines against China. The United States now deploys 2 aircraft carrier battle groups in the South China Sea with many warships and military airplanes try to put pressure on China. On the other hand, China is very happy to engage with the Philippines. We want to make sure that the Chinese people and the Filipino people are friends and good neighbors, and we have the wisdom and the diplomatic skills to resolve our differences, including our territorial disputes in the coming months and coming years. This ruling itself coming out of The Hague is illegal, and China will stick firm to its principle, and China will take all the measures necessary to defend its sovereignty and territorial integrity in the South China Sea.
Michael and Amra, this is just a sweeping ruling in favor of the Philippines. And frankly, there couldn't be a much worse outcome for the Chinese in terms of this specific case out of The Hague. The court ruled on a number of different factors here, but the biggest one really has to do with China's claims of sovereignty based on historical rights in the South China Sea. So China has long said that it has historical rights that go back hundreds of years, that its ancestors fished the South China Sea waters. It can point to maps, it says, that prove that China really has sovereignty and therefore the economic rights that go with that sovereignty. The Philippines said they rejected that and that China is actually violating international law by building artificial islands and seizing territory. And the court firmly agreed with the Philippines. It said that China has no basis for those historical rights, and by signing on to the law, the Convention of the Law of the Sea, this international law at the center of all this, they actually gave up those historical rights. And so what does that mean? Well, that means that according to international law in The Hague, it's wide open, that China no longer has those exclusive economic rights. But The Hague can't enforce this, right? There's not going to be UN peacekeeping troops all of a sudden showing up in the South China Sea, making sure that China doesn't continue to do what it's doing. So really what happens next is up to China. Will it be the status quo? Will they continue to develop those islands? Will they ramp up those artificial island building in a real big act of defiance, perhaps create an air defense identification zone requiring foreign ships and planes to register with China to come into that area? That could be very provocative. Analysts say that could create more tension. Or will they maybe ease back, try and engage a little bit more diplomatic on a diplomatic level with other claimants in the South China Sea? That remains to be seen at this point. Beijing, though, saying today that it would not adhere to any ruling out of the court and that they do not recognize this decision from The Hague, saying it didn't have the jurisdiction to rule. So this is an issue that is not going away. How China responds in the future, in the short term and the long term, has big-time implications for a region that is already very tense. Michael, Amra.